Good evening, Spaceship Earth and its passengers. Last week it was so over, but this week we're so back. It's the Don and Brederick program. I'm your host, Don DeGare, and I'm here with my co-host, Brederick McDonald.
Hey, here, loud and clear, Brederick McDonald, locked and loaded.
Brederick, do you want to take us away here and introduce our first topic of discussion to the wonderful audience?
I would love to do that, Don. Thank you so much. Our first topic is actually a topic that is, I was going to say near and dear to my heart, but that's not the case. It's not dear, and it's certainly not near to my heart. It is to other people's, and that is the concept of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. Commonly associated with people of the boomer generation and other people that hate progress. And it usually comes from like a good place. At least that's what they tell you. But it's not actually coming from a good place. It's coming from a selfish place very often. And many of the millennials and the Gen Zers beneath us really feel that. And they have no voice, so they're turning to socialism. Okay? And they're electing crazy people. Okay. And then, you know, there are these people in that boomer generation who are like, I don't understand. I just don't understand why anyone would follow someone like Mamdani, or name your favorite socialist person who knows nothing about economics but sounds really good. And that was the preamble to our topic. So there is a very swanky place in Grand Rapids, Michigan called East Grand Rapids. Everyone loves
East Grand Rapids.
Yes.
Ooh.
Everyone, thank you, Don. Everyone either loves or hates East Grand Rapids, and it usually depends if you live there or not, okay? East Grand Rapids is a nice place. It actually is beautiful. They have a lot of nice amenities. They have large property tax bills, but they also have a nice school. They have a beautiful lake. They've got all sorts of great things. You know what they don't have? They don't have a 147-unit apartment building that was approved by their city council with a budget north of $100 million because a concerned citizen or someone acting on their behalf, it's always tough to tell, sued and said, hey, you know that whole like process that the developer went through to get that done and did all this investment and this, that, and the other, and then the city council actually approved it? Well, it turns out on a technicality, some judge overturned that, and now they have to do some kind of revote. The details actually don't matter, okay? The detail that matters is this is a classic example of NIMBYism in action, and while the first-order effects may seem benign, the second, third, fourth-order effects are destroying our society.
And that's apartment building?
That's what I want to talk about.
Not in my backyard. It's destroying my society. Housing destroys my society in East Grand Rapids. I would like to point out to any listeners that don't know this, but I think it's important to understand why East Grand Rapids is not part of the city of Grand Rapids.
Yes.
Back in the day, for whatever, it's kind of like an enclave. It's like Lesotho in South Africa. They just kind of carved themselves out of Grand Rapids is kind of like a square. And East Grand Rapids just seceded from that square of city somehow. I don't know how that process worked, but clearly they have their own way of doing things. And municipal secession is probably just the beginning of this story, but it's clearly ending with, you know, highly litigious citizens that just could not bear an apartment building.
Well, and this is where, you know, on the Don and Brederick program, we actually like to have thoughtful conversations. And while I am against NIMBYism for many things, I actually would like to come to these people's aid for a moment. Because there is NIMBYism for selfish reasons, then there is NIMBYism also for like that doesn't make sense reasons. And there's something that I've noticed with a lot of these so-called affordable housing projects. For those of us who haven't gathered, East Grand Rapids is a little bit of a high income area. Okay. You aren't poor living in EGR. Is that true, Don?
There are no poor people. The poor people are banished to the city proper. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, a lot of these projects now, because of brain dead zoning thinking, they're like, you have to have so many units that are so quote unquote affordable housing. Now, this is where I must come to the aid of the NIMBY people. It makes no sense to make affordable housing in East Grand Rapids. It makes no sense to me because all you're doing is taking people who cannot afford to live in that place and socially engineering them in there, which has been proven to cause all sorts of issues. So I understand that angle of a lot of these programs, and I that's something I've never understood. And maybe you have some thoughts on that, Don.
Well, do you think their worry is just that people on Section 8 housing will move into their neighborhood and cause a ruckus or whatever? I don't know. That's my assumption, right? Like, I don't know what other reason there would be that you don't want subsidized housing in your city.
I think that that's exactly their concern.
Yeah.
And I guess my contention is I'm not sure they're wrong.
Yeah, I mean, okay, Dan, are we about to become NIMBYs? Everyone, if you are watching, you can see my house that I just purchased behind me. It's a beautiful house. Goes for $1 million in Los Angeles. It was. I have a big mortgage payment. Anyways, back to the topic. Yeah, like there are parts of a city where, poverty will just create. I don't know. How do I describe this? Poverty is closely associated with crime and other things that people don't want to be around. That being said, where are these people going to live? So my assumption is that this law, right, that you need to include affordable housing is from the state level. Otherwise, like, why would they have subsidized housing in East Grand Rapids, like the fanciest zip code, one of the fanciest zip codes in the state of Michigan, if not the entire Midwest? Mm-hmm. It has to be a state level regulation. I don't know. And I think that's put in place with good intention, because otherwise property developers would only build luxury apartments because they want to make as much money as possible. And I assume that's where they would get their highest margin. That's my assumption, right? Like, is anyone making money? I don't know. I'm going to ask you, is anyone making money off of market rate housing? Because it seems like every apartment building that I see built is luxury or the projects, usually some weird combination of the two, like you mentioned with this unit that has subsidized units inside of it.
Yeah. Well, I think land use is a very complex topic, and I think that people have tried to come up with a lot of different solutions. But the problem is they always bake the cake. And what I mean by that is a pure government project-based thing going to work? No, we just know that empirically. They haven't worked in 100 years. They're not going to work due to some new scheme that you've come up with, because there's no buy-in from the actual people inhabiting that. There's no buy-in to make it a better community, at least the way that they've been instantiated in the last however many decades, right? But the problem, though, is the reason in a lot of these municipalities, at least my time in the whole Bay Area, the reason they only built new luxury units was because they were exempted from the rental control laws, because luxury was always exempted from rental control. And so it wasn't actually like, oh, I can't make money and I can't do a good business at this lower price point. It's due to the whole economic environment that has been created.
They were like avoiding the legal overhead more so than trying to just get rich people.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And I think there's also this argument of just like, you have the new units that get built, and as they cycle through their life cycle, they become the lower units, right? As they become older. This just makes sense. And I guess there's so many things to be said on this, but I guess one of my things that I just get upset about is I do not live in a luxury situation, okay? I have a nice place now, this, that, and the other, but I rented for over 15 years. And the places that I could afford living a responsible lifestyle on my income were shitholes in the Bay Area. They were not nice places. I mean, they weren't shitholes, but like they were not
Did you live
nice
with rats?
places. There were rats on the premises, yes.
Yeah, everywhere I lived in California had rats, but it was a symbiotic relationship, right? If the rats went away, my rent would have been unaffordable. So
that's interesting.
you like, oh yeah, it was bad, but the rats were there to help you, man. Sorry, I know that's a side topic, but
No,
yeah. Long story short, you didn't live in luxury conditions.
I did not live in luxury conditions.
And you didn't live in subsidized conditions.
I did not live in subsidized conditions. And that's actually what I started to realize was they opened up this like whole new row of units, and they were all subsidized units, but they were much nicer than my units. So what you had was me living 2 blocks away, and then you had these so-called subsidized units, which were actually nicer than my place, but I made too much money to qualify to live there. And I just felt something upset me about that, because I'm like, I'm paying the taxes that are funding this project. I can't live there. I can't afford to live in a place that's as nice as that place. And so I'm in this like very interesting middle ground that is wrong. You should not be having people who aren't able to afford as much, who I am then having my money forcibly taken away from me to pay for their place. I don't agree with that. That seems wrong to me.
Well, it's like, this reminds me of this idea of there being a hidden environment to the built environment, or like a hidden structure to the built environment. And that's these legal and other, but mainly legal structures or paradigms that dictate how things are built, right? Like when I left the United States for the first time and went overseas, I could not comprehend that everything wasn't tracked single use, like single family housing. That blew my mind. I was like, where is the single family housing, and why do they allow retail next to the housing? It doesn't make any sense.
No sense.
And then I realized actually that especially in Michigan is a great example. In the United States, actually, we have a very developed paradigm, and we've actually gone through multiple different paradigms that dictates how the built environment should look. Cities in Michigan, Grand Rapids especially, probably even more so than Detroit, is you can see the progression of the paradigm of the built environment. You can start in Heritage Hill in these 19th century homes where clearly the rule was build whatever you want, because you have triplexes, right? Like, 3-unit stacked brick buildings next to these wooden gingerbread houses that the Dutch immigrant master carpenters built. And then if you go directly out, you get to the streetcar suburbs, or not streetcar suburbs, but like streetcar neighborhoods, which were never meant to accommodate automobile ownership. They all have street-facing porches, many in the craftsman style. And then you go just a little bit further, and suddenly all the front porches go away. Everyone has a driveway, and you have that classic post-war housing structure. And then you go just a little further out, and you've reached the built environment paradigm that I think we're currently in, where your house is a space station and your car is a spaceship.
Suburbia.
And you can see the progression of that. And it seems weird, but the reason that there's those layers of housing is because of the rules that were made around it. And then you go to a place like India, and you're like, whoa, why is there a Lamborghini next to a person in a tent with 2 goats next to a skyscraper next to like a mall? And you realize that they just maybe have not had such a nitpicky or obsessive, or whatever adjective you want to use, paradigm for their built environment. And for Americans, it's just it's the water. We're fish swimming in that water, and I think it's hard for us to see. But there's a ton of baked in assumptions and rules and regulations that people need to follow before a single shovel digs a foundation for a structure.
Yeah, exactly. And so this lawsuit, basically what it's doing is it's just adding more cost. It's adding more and more and more and more cost. And Probably this thing will get built, I bet you, because there are apartments in East Grand Rapids and people want to live there. And so the developer is like, yeah, we're just going to invest the money and we're going to keep doing this. But like, this is what costs housing. This is why housing costs so much, because of these lawsuits, because of all this odious regulation, because of the NIMBYism of people just fighting it, you know?
Well, how much did it cost for them to go through the approval process just to have it struck down on a technicality, right? Can you imagine spending, I would assume in the tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. Maybe that's a low end assessment.
Yeah.
Only to be like, oh, well, we got to do it all over again. And before I forget, I have one more thing to say. The subsidized housing may make sense for a place like East Grand Rapids because there are old people that want to retire, right? I assume there were people who bought houses there back before you could only buy houses if you had a lot of money, right? Or sometimes older people can't sell their houses because they don't have an affordable place to move. So if you grew up in East Grand Rapids and you want to stay there and you're an older person and you want to sell your house, it would be and you don't have a ton of money in the bank, it would be nice to have, some affordable apartment that you could relocate to. So the affordable housing isn't just going to inevitably attract, I don't know, people who would cause problems, however you want to define that.
I wish I could believe you, Don, but I think that the term affordable housing has been hijacked. And I think it's been hijacked by crazy people that want to blow up the social fabric. That's actually what I mean. And I think what it is there are real structural problems that could be solved with real market solutions specifically related to housing. But because of this kind of craziness, they're not able to actually build more housing on the open market. Then the only option a lot of these young people have is to elect actual crazy people from a lot of these socialists or even more radical groups into government and just being, okay, well, we're just going to use the cudgel of government and we're going to destroy these communities by putting in housing that the only people who qualify are very low income people. And I'm sorry, they don't have the same cultural milieu as East Grand Rapids on average. Are there some exceptions? I'm sure. And then now you're doing social engineering. And all of these problems are being created because they just can't get the housing situation figured out. I think that's a lot of what's going on here.
Yeah, but you can't ignore the other part of it. And I'm going to take the perspective of the normalist normal person, the most regular middle of the bell curve person. When you think about a market economy, the housing market, which is one of the markets that you have the most intimate contacts with as a human in the United States. And houses, you don't have to be a genius to see that house prices have doubled, in some areas more than doubled in less than 10 years. Have anybody's incomes doubled, right? I think that the market, right, it's very easy for socialists to make a pitch because the housing market specifically, is so anti-common person. And it's just simple math. Nobody's income has doubled. Unless you are like an AI researcher, nobody has had their income increase proportional to the cost of housing. Housing, any housing. And everyone is just feeling in not just a little pinch, an extreme pinch that seems to be accelerating. And
it
when
is
people
accelerating.
reach that point of desperation, you will listen to anyone who gives you a solution. And that problem, go ahead.
But that solution is not a solution. And what's happened actually is the reason the housing has gone up like this is due to inflation, due to spending at the federal level, which is theft of the purchasing power. It's one of the greatest intergenerational transfers of all time, if not of all time. And that's actually what people need to realize. And the problem is the solutions that these socialist people are putting forward will make it worse, not better. So what I'm suggesting is these NIMBY people need to have a conversation with themselves and a textbook on some kind of basic economic principles and just say, do I want to still live in a society that has these fundamental values of upward mobility, of I can actually build a lifestyle for myself, or do we not?
I don't think they do.
They don't
think they do. Look, if you have enough money, your kids will inherit the money, right?
This is not true, though.
And you can almost every single person.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm on a rant, but like what I'm saying is like this whole system's going to blow up right now, and it's blowing up over issues like housing because they're going to elect people who will confiscate all of these people's shit. You want to see inheritance tax go to 100%? Keep doing this kind of stuff. Keep suing over these things. Keep insisting on not understanding what affordable means. Keep getting your gym memberships through Social Security. Keep spending money on insane, endless wars. Keep paying old people that didn't bring any value to society to live at a higher lifestyle than they did when they were contributing to the economy. Like, this is insane, man.
Game theory. Okay, game theory. You own a house that's surging in value. Mm-hmm. The world is getting a little chaotic. And you also happen to live in a municipality like East Grand Rapids that could, if they wanted to, build actual walls. I think I was driving around the Detroit area once, and I drove from Detroit to Grosse Pointe, and I think Grosse Pointe has actual walls, like actual physical barriers.
They do. There are certain intersections in Detroit where that community, Grosse Pointe or Grosse Ile or whichever one it is, literally just installed giant barricades at the end of all the streets because they're like, we don't want you to be able to just drive in here. They're going to put
robotic machine guns. They're going to, I mean, that's already what rich people in Mexico are like, I think. I watched a movie about that once, like 15 years ago. So that's my only source of information on that. But why would you, look, these people already carved themselves out of wider society when they seceded from the city of Grand Rapids. Like, they do not want to have, they don't want to be a part of the tax base of the city of Grand Rapids. They don't want to be a part of the problems of wider society. I would argue that this is this municipal secession. Michigan is the best example of this, I think, of almost anywhere in the United States. Maybe California is a good example as well. I mean, I'm sure it happens all over the place, but look at the Detroit area where you had the whole population of Detroit just migrate and pull all of their tax wealth into new municipalities. It was just they were like, we don't care anymore. Anyone who can't afford to leave this place, it's over. And so this is a multi-decade sentiment, right? This is not a new phenomenon. It's just become more extreme because the prices of housing are getting so high. Yes, Brederick, you have a question.
Yes, and. Okay, yes, and. People do not leave communities. People do not leave companies. People do not leave families where things are going well and things are being promoted and there is flourishing happening. They don't do it. It's a reaction to a problem. The problem is we have way too many people who are all about me, and they don't understand, and this is a generational issue. It's also a regional issue, like you pointed out, where it's like, yes, and. Yes, you can live in East Grand Rapids. Oh, but by the way, you don't live on an island. You live in a community. And if that community starts to fall off, we got bigger problems. And everyone up until apparently 50 years ago knew this. They always knew they had to invest in the next generation. They always knew they had to invest in their communities because they weren't so short-sighted as to say, I'm just going to take up the whole pie. I'm going to pull up the ladder and just do this, because they knew that eventually they would dry up and they would be completely cut off. And then there would be a revolution and then they'd have a problem. People don't think that way anymore.
I remember reading a great article a few years ago. I think it was in The Wall Street Journal. I think it was a Wall Street Journal article, and it was about the phenomenon of super zips, where you have, specific zip codes where all of the wealth is aggregating. And the beginning of the article, the first paragraph talked about Monroe, Michigan, actually near Toledo.
Yes.
It's like Michigan's only port on Lake Erie, I think. In Monroe, they brought up this example of this guy who was like the richest dude in Monroe, Michigan, and his house was a block away from some of the poorest people, and they would all go to the same movie theater. The point they were trying to make is that there was, within a single municipality, there was a broad distribution of wealth. And the wealthier members of that community felt engaged with the whole community. They were like, this rich guy in Monroe would put his money into the community of Monroe, Michigan. I guarantee you, and they made this point later in the article, all of this dude's descendants, they probably all moved to Birmingham, and then their kids probably moved to, I don't know, Manhattan or something like that. So there's been this assortive, and East Grand Rapids is a great example. Once upon a time, they were part of Grand Rapids, and then they were like, cut themselves out of the map. Nope, not anymore. You're on your own. And then, I mean, there's more that goes into that, right? This gets into the whole narrative about, or, argument's not the right word. It gets messy, right? Because it gets into white flight and deindustrialization and kind of like the racial conflicts in American cities in the second half, or not, I mean, in the entire 20th century, really. Mm-hmm. It's a big thing to uncork, but what you were saying, yes, you're right. People need to feel more invested in their community, but the trend line over the last 100 years has been no one in the United States wants to be invested in any community except for one that is full of people exactly like them.
I'm not sure that's true. Vis-a-vis Silicon Valley would be a great counterexample. I think the entire American project is a counterexample to that. But I think that people, if you mean people who believe in the same things, then I think you're right. I know I'm painting over a broad brush there, but like in general, there's been a unification up until the last basically 10 years, maybe 15 years in the American project. I think so. But I must say, I think we've opened up a can of worms and we've touched on a lot of things.
There's so many worms left.
But I know, but that's why we do it every week. But what I am actually interested in right now is something related to this, and that is the fact that Larry Ellison, billionaire owner of Oracle, and I don't even know what else at this point. I mean, he owns so many different things. Apparently who I believe Larry Ellison is in his 80s,
I think he's almost 90. He's like 89 or something.
Yeah, I think he is actually. And he's got one of those young little fangs as a wife. I believe she is 33.
Yes, and let me be. I'm not sure if they're married. Okay, yeah. Larry Ellison has a 33-year-old wife who is definitely a Chinese spy.
Fascinating.
She's a Chinese spy. This is why this is weird to me. Wouldn't people notice if Jack Ma, the owner of Alibaba, was married to like Miss Texas? Right?
That would cause a little bit of a pause amongst many observers. Yes.
30-year-old former Miss America is married to a Chinese billionaire. Right. So it's kind of weird. Larry Ellison is married to a 33-year-old Chinese woman who went to University of Michigan. Go Blue.
Go Blue.
I have no idea what she studied. It doesn't matter. Maybe it does. But this is why I think she's a Chinese spy. Okay. If you let's switch this up. Let's go back to this example where Jack Ma is married to like 30-year-old former Miss America. Mm-hmm. If I was in the CIA, I would be like, we need to go talk to her. We have all her information, and she is intimately involved with one of the most influential people in China. I know Jack Ma had his whole disappearing incident, so you can argue about how influential he is, but I would be like, we need to go talk to her. I just assume that if people from your country are involved with very powerful people from another country, especially romantic partners, like that country's security services are going to make it a priority to be in touch with those people.
Mm-hmm.
Further evidence for my theory that Larry Ellison is biblically knows a Chinese spy.
Okay. All right. Don. Okay. I've gave you the floor here to introduce this. Okay. I really did. You haven't said anything other than she's a Chinese spy because she's from China and married to a billionaire. Now, I admit there's a gold digger situation going on here. Okay. The fingers up. Give me a little more evidence here so I can get on your team on this one.
A lot of China's AI inference, or not the inference, the training, the compute for training their models comes from an Oracle data center in Malaysia, which I believe was built after they, got together. Right? This is like his 7th or 8th wife. Maybe it's his 9th wife. I don't know.
Wow.
Right?
I hope there's a strong prenup there.
Yeah, there definitely is. But maybe not. All I want to say is this.
They married
this
for
is
love.
kind of crazy. You're right. They're in love. They're so in love. Do you want to see a picture?
Man.
For those who can't,
screen.
hear, those who can't.
So as Don brings this up, I must admit, I have never seen her before, and I'm thinking she must be quite a looker.
Here we are.
It's a little bit zoomed out, and she has a baseball cap on. But, I mean, she looks cute from this angle, but I'm not sure if she's billionaire wife material, especially with that age differential.
It sounds like this first surfaced because she was instrumental in getting Michigan to getting the number one high school quarterback in the United States to commit to University of Michigan. I guess she made some calls. Yeah, so I guess this was taken in 2018. I think she's 33 right now. Like this has been going on for a long time. So this photo. This is pre-data center. So China starved for chips. Oracle in 2022 starts this crazy AI build out. They build a gigantic data center in Malaysia, and suddenly all of these Chinese models are coming out that are competing with American frontier models with a fraction of the compute, and a lot of the training compute comes from Oracle.
I see.
This all makes sense now, right? Do you understand now, Brederick?
You're starting to paint a more compelling picture. It took me a little bit to follow you there, but I understand what you're saying now. I am still going to put this as dubious, but it's not. There's at least directionally some pretty compelling evidence, I would say. Like circumstantial, like this makes sense. Like we need someone who can make moves in the tech community to get on our side. This man is a known like he could be susceptible to a young, hot thang Chinese woman flying over. A lot of Chinese people in the Bay Area. Like, so he has experience with this people group, let's say. Ergo, we get our agent in there, this young lady. She then starts to influence our man who is capable of making things happen in the Bay Area due to, one, his wealth, his connections. He's also he didn't become a billionaire just hanging out. He has agency. And then the follow through is pillow talk. She says, actually, Larry, I need you to build a data center in Malaysia outside the influence of U.S. export control. And you give access to Chinese AI frontier lab moonshot. And
she's like, for my birthday, Larry, for my birthday. And he's just like, it's 50% Botox. He's just like, yes. yes, I will do that for like the cigarette voice.
Yes. Thank you. Me love you long time.
Yes,
with giving us big data center.
I think that's not okay. There are other prominent people.
You're not crazy. I want to be very clear to the audience that while I am making fun of Don, I don't think he's proposed far crazier things. This is not that crazy.
This is very reasonable. Let's
I
also
would not go to say very reasonable, but I would say it's directionally I could get behind this.
I think okay, let's talk about spies. How do spies work?
Okay.
Right? You have people who you have foreign nationals who or people from your country that come into contact with other foreign nationals, many of them organically, right? And then you have someone at like the PLAs or whatever their spy division is. I assume it's part of the PLA for some reason. Everything is, and
I think that's how it works over there. That stands for People Liberation Army.
Yeah. They have people that go to like their version of the farm or Quantico, and then they go out and they go and contact all of the important people. And even if they don't want to, right? I'm not saying that she wants to ask Larry Ellison to give her a data center in Malaysia for her birthday, but she could have been blackmailed into that, right?
Oh, yeah.
You're like, dude. She married Larry Ellison. The alarm bells go off in the headquarters. They're like, okay, everyone go and let's just find every single one of her family members and threaten her and be like, if you don't get this data center for your 30th birthday, bad things are going to happen, right? Like, this is not all consensual. Like, you can be a spy and be pressured into it. Like, you don't want to do it, but you have to. That's how a lot of this intelligence work functions.
Can I tell you a true story? This is a firsthand story. Many of you, it is true. Many of you know, listening, I went to graduate school at Berkeley in the Bay Area, and obviously I knew many mainland Chinese guys personally, quite well, some of them, because I was in classes with them, I was in programs with them, and there was one guy, I'm not going to dox him, in particular, that I used to, I talked to this guy a lot because he was in the same building as me, and I knew him personally as a friend. We got food together, this, that, and the other, and I always used to make these jokes about all sorts of crazy stuff the Chinese were doing, the social credit score, like all of these different things. And finally, in my last year at Berkeley, I was at Berkeley for 6 years. I remember one time getting a meal with this guy. And I had made another joke, this, that, and the other. And he goes, "You want me to be very real with you?" And I go, "Yeah." And I go, "Yeah, of course." I said, "I thought we were, we're kind of like work friends, this, that, and then." He goes, and I never told this part of the thing. Every time I would make like a joke or this, that, and the other, he would always come back with like the standard Chinese party line. And it would always kind of be in this funny, like joking way, but it was always like an official CPP line, right? CCP line. And then in my last year at Berkeley, last semester, we're getting lunch. And he goes, "I'm going to be very honest with you." He goes, "For the years, you've been saying all this crazy stuff, and I've actually agreed personally with almost everything. But I know for a fact that the Chinese embassy recruits Americans to spy on Chinese people and report back things." And he goes, "But you've been so consistent and you say so much outlandish shit that there's just no way that you could have done this." And I like added up a few like interactions, and I just realized that you're just kind of a crazy American. But I just wanted to tell you off the record that I like agree with almost everything that you've said, but I could never say it publicly. That's a true story.
Yeah. He's like, "Brederick, I trust you."
Exactly.
I waited. I followed you for a week to see if you would go to the embassy or contact your handler, and I trust you. Well,
never did.
So we're talking about.
I'm just saying to your point, though, Don, is you're onto something. Like that is true. A lot of this is blackmail based.
Yeah. So okay, what's her name? Jolyn. Her name is Jolyn. So Jolyn, she could be from the PLA Honeypot Command, or she could be a regular person. But there's no way she is not in like the top 10 list of people we need to force to do stuff, right? And look at a lot of these Chinese researchers that come to the United States. I guarantee you that if you are a prominent Chinese worker in any major American firm, you have been contacted or are being monitored by some sort of or some sort of like Chinese government intelligence asset. And the United States may do the same thing, to be totally honest. I don't know if they do, but
I don't know either.
I remember speculation that Hunter Biden was dating an Israeli woman, and there were people speculating like, oh, this is a risk, right? But I'm like, if you were the Israelis and you have this single guy who is the son of the president, why would you not be like, like, I was about to make up like an Israeli name for
it's all right.
honeypot command. I'm not going to do it. So they go to their honeypot command and they're like, number one target, like the King of Hearts or however the card system works, Hunter Biden.
Yeah.
So
it makes
that's just
sense.
how I think the whole thing works.
Well, honestly, though, it makes sense. I'm coming around to your whole theory here. I'm not sure. I haven't seen any hard evidence, but like you paint a picture that makes a lot of sense. I actually want to go one step further and say it would actually be irresponsible of any honest, like, patriot of any country that believes in their country and they work in a capacity to be able to do this kind of stuff to not pursue these opportunities. So what I mean by that is the equivalent, the PLA person who would be in charge of this, it's almost their duty to themselves and their people and their country to attempt to do something like this. And I say that just as someone who loves people. I obviously love the United States. I hope our people are this competent and doing things like this across the world. But it's almost like, I think Donald Rumsfeld was the guy that said responsible allies spy on each other. Wasn't he the guy that said that?
Dude, who is the American that married into the royal family? What's her name?
Yeah, Meghan Markle, I think is her name.
Meghan
right?
Markle came from Quantico Honeypot School. They picked her out of Hollywood, and they were like, Meghan, we have a mission for you. What is it?
The problem with her,
the British royal family.
The problem with her, though, is she, I think, and I'm not a royalty expert, but didn't she actually blow up the royal family? Didn't they, like, extricate themselves from the royal family?
Oh, maybe that was part of the plan, Brederick.
Oh, I see.
I don't know.
I see. Look, honestly, you're right. You could be right, man.
Okay. So the example I had earlier with Jack Ma, like getting married to Miss America several decades younger than him. I think the more accurate analogy here with the data point of the data center in Malaysia would be like, what's her name? Like Kate Upton getting married to Jack Ma, and then Alibaba partnering with Whirlpool to build the world's biggest drone manufacturing facility in Tijuana. That's kind of the comparison here. Is that a fair comparison?
I think that would be quite analogous. Yes, I think you're right.
And when the last part of the analogy is no one really says anything. Jack Ma walks around with Kate Upton in China. They go to, I don't know, whatever activities, and everyone's like, oh, that's normal.
That's normal.
Is it?
That's normal.
Come on, guys.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah,
good for Larry Ellison and good for China. Good
it's
for
not
Deep
normal.
Sea. Good for Malaysia.
It's not normal. Yeah, I mean,
good for the royal family.
It's all this stuff is upsetting because it's not insane. I mean, I think it's a little more than I see evidence for, but it's one of those things that, like, in a few years, I could see some dossiers getting leaked that confirm maybe this not in whole, but in part.
Look, if I ran an intelligence agency, which I don't, for the record, internet, I do not run an intelligence agency. Don does not run an intelligence agency. I would just have a list of all of the most important people that I want to get leverage over. And the list would always start with business, with political and business and military leadership. Excuse me. And you best believe Larry Ellison, who was briefly the richest person in the world, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. I mean, he's at the top of every single country's list of get influence on this guy. And so I just think you have to think that's the way the world works. I think if you don't, you are misunderstanding what the job of these intelligence agencies, and also the risks for people in power. Like if you reach a certain amount of power, if you get a certain amount of spotlight, you will get on that list and people will target you and they'll send, depending on how they feel about you, they'll try to honeypot you, bribe you, assassinate. Like you'll just be on the list and they'll start being like, what's the playbook for this person on the list?
Dude, stuff is weird like that. And I'll just share another story. So, you and I both know many people in the Bay Area, and I was out there with a particular person that you and I both know rather well. And we went to a party in the Mission. This was just like a I don't want to say a throwaway party, but like it wasn't like a big thing.
Yeah,
it was
like
like
soiree.
Yeah, but it was like, it was a little more grungy than that. It was like a techno party. There was a bunch of crypto people there when I used to work in crypto and this, that, and the other. And I don't think I should share this person's name. I don't know, just because I don't want to be weird. But like, there was an extremely influential tech billionaire there that was just there in the crowd, if you will. And literally, I'm sitting there in this like weird courtyard thing in San Francisco in the Mission. And this dude who I just met, literally, he just looks at me and he just goes in and he goes, hey, don't look back right now. But this guy is right behind you. And I'm like, bullshit. There's no way that guy, everyone would know this guy, very famous guy, very wealthy guy. And I'm like, that's bullshit, man. There's no way that guy's at this party right now. This, that. And he's like, no, I'm not kidding you. So I just like very discreetly look over and I'm just like, it was 100% him, 100% him. And I'm just like, what is this guy doing at this party? It makes no sense. Like, don't you have other stuff to do? Like, don't you have like, shouldn't you have like bodyguards around you? Like you move markets, man. How are you just here at some crazy party in the Mission? I felt nervous walking in this place. How did you just walk in here, man? So all I'm saying is, to your point, is the world is like more fragile than we think. And getting influence over somebody like that literally, if this guy were to do something or do like be hurt or killed or something, like the market would move. It would be international news. So I don't know. It's very interesting to think who's actually pulling the triggers and that kind of stuff. And influence is very important.
Yeah. It's almost like you need to assume that if someone doesn't have leverage over this person, they are trying to get leverage over every single influential person. Like if I am Long Da and I am the head of PLA Honeypot Command, I'm going to be like, how do you get into that party? I'm going to be like, my subordinates, go to this party and find how to get into this party in the Mission, which
figure it out.
Isn't that hard. Yeah, you just need to become like a circling specialist in the rationalist community or whatever.
No, I mean, dude, not even that. Like I guess this person scored us the invites to this, but like we just rolled up. We just rolled up to this like apartment building and just walked in. We didn't buy tickets or anything like that. We just walked in. I mean, we knew the party was happening and we knew that there were going to be a bunch of people there, but like, I don't know. You want me to tell you something I do know, though, Don?
Yeah. Tell me.
That's a pretty simple thing, that currently the education system, the higher education system in America is in crisis because it's run by a bunch of crazy people, basically. And a lot of them don't believe in some things that have actually proved out to be pretty helpful over the years, like grades. Would you like to issue in our next topic?
Yes. As the viewers may know, Don and Brederick both attended the august University of Michigan, and this institution has recently decided to suspend grades for all freshmen in the School of Literature, Science, and the Arts. So this deserves a little specification, especially for those that didn't go to this school and understand the different schools within University of Michigan. But basically, to elaborate further, the university decided that not having grades freshman year would address a mental health crisis among their students. Mm-hmm. I don't really know where to go from here because there's so many directions. Well, let's point out first that I was in this said school, and I probably would have benefited from not having grades my freshman year. Brederick was on North Campus with the engineers, and my understanding is the engineering school is not doing this. They're probably actually going to force everyone to do some kind of like, I don't know, heat transfer class as a freshman, just as, you know, an added level of
just to
abuse. Yeah.
Well, I can say a few things here because I actually do have an opinion on this. And so LS&A, Literature, Science, and Arts, or as engineers used to call it, Ellison Play, okay, which makes no sense because any engineer will tell you the hardest classes that they have to take in their first 2 years are LS&A classes because it includes such simple-minded departments as mathematics, physics, chemistry,
I forgot those are in LS&A.
economics. Those are 4 majors right there. None of those are clown show majors. None of them. Those are like Nobel laureates, okay? Ted Kaczynski was a University of Michigan LS and Play student, just to give us a throwback. Like, it wasn't really serious because everyone knew that math was really hard, and Michigan is a punching above its weight in terms of like a big state school mathematics program. It doesn't make any sense, but in terms of like joking and making fun of Ellison, because they do very, very serious work, and it is a major university. Now, I am on the complete opposite side of this. I think removing grades is a terrible idea, and I say this as someone whose freshman year at university was the kind of worst, quote unquote, I ever did academically. I did not do well my first year. It was a very hard adjustment for me emotionally. I was 17, 18 years old. I was 18 when I went to college. I was 17 when I graduated, and I turned 18 over that summer. And it was hard moving away from my family. My family we're close. I moved, 2.5 hours away from home. I was living with some dude in a room that I didn't know that well, right? I mean, you're like, whatever. The level of rigor in some of the classes was pretty hard, namely mathematics courses I took. Chemistry wasn't too hard. I took a couple psych classes. That wasn't too bad. But, like, it was just a big transition for me. However, it was a transition for me, and I was able to adjust to the new level, and I did okay, even though I had a little bit of a lower GPA my freshman year. And I think that this is playing into the soft culture and playing into the, I need a special ribbon. My freshman year was so hard. Everyone's freshman year is hard.
You know, I think that's actually the soft culture, as you mentioned. I think this is actually more of a symptom than a disease. This is the disease. The people like you and the aerospace engineers, and honestly the art students who work their ass off.
Art students work very hard.
And they work everyone who works hard is on North Campus for some reason. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, music students.
The music, they work they're
those people would lock themselves
their
in rooms,
fingertips off.
Yeah.
It's
they
need
hardcore. A mental health day.
Well, LSA, I think the term Ellison Play actually is accurately. There's a phenomenon that I noticed in Ellison where it's kind of like a capture area for a lot of like the fail sons of Wall Street bankers and other people that have too much money and their kids couldn't get into Ivy League schools. And these people actually formed the financial backbone of the university because out-of-state students, this is not just American fail sons. There are foreign fail sons as well. And I'm using fail son as a gender-neutral term. Right?
Yes.
So you can have, daughters of who couldn't get into Ivy League schools who go to LSA and really don't care about any kind of education at all. Their parents are footing a $60K a year bill, and they're just there to really replicate their family's status. Replicating your family's status is stressful, especially when you need to project the appearance of being intelligent. And
I see.
I think that the University of Michigan specifically, because it has such a large student size, student body, undergrad student body compared to Ivy League schools, ends up being a particular. Everyone who applies to these Ivy League schools applies to Michigan, and that's where they will go if they don't get into the Ivies, Stanford, Northwestern, the whatnot, right? Because they're like, oh, it's a bigger student body, I have a chance of getting in. And I think over half of Michigan students are out of state, and Michigan.
Oh, when I
University of
was
Michigan
there, it
really
was more
wants
than that.
They really want that big paycheck from the out of state students. So they're willing to take you if you're going to foot the full bill, and you can kind of make the cut. A lot of the university system, in my opinion, from what I observed, is placing people into patronage systems.
Oh,
So
my
from the
goodness.
University
Okay.
of Michigan, as well as, the Ivy League schools, you have access to all of the most elite organizations in the world, right? People from Michigan are going to many of the same places. They have access to almost all of the institutions that people from Harvard do, right? Like they're going to these big consulting firms, going to big jobs in government, the CIA. They're what I know many of these people, right?
Yeah. I agree with you.
But
I agree with you.
I think you also have this large body of people who are just there to, I don't know, party.
Yeah. Well,
And-
I can tell you,
Yeah,
just
they-
anecdotally, I
there
knew a
are
lot
people
of
that
those
work hard.
kids.
There are
There's-
people that
oh.
work hard.
Well, I actually have a model for this, and I'll tell you that. So, like, what happens is actually, due to many, many reasons, if you go to basically any major university in the United States and you take out the top like 0.1%, they're actually all in the same stratosphere of competence. I'm talking about the top 0.1%. Because there are many reasons, you just listed a few of them, but there are many reasons that everybody just can't go to Harvard. And there's a lot of reasons that people stay in state, or people stay at some of these maybe less nameplate schools, but are just as competent and are just as driven and work just as hard. So that top part often is equal across the board. Now at Harvard, if you go to the bottom 0.1%, and I know they've got all these crazy legacy things and this, that, and the other, and they even have a whole problem with admitting people who are completely underqualified to go there now. But like on average, if you were to pull out, let's say, the 20th percentile student, that person is still highly, highly competent. Versus at some of these bigger state schools, you pull out that 20th percent person and you genuinely wonder what they're doing with their lives. And they're just, like what you said, they're partying, I have to go to school, whatever.
You know what I noticed though? I didn't meet I met almost no one that I met. And I met a lot of people at Michigan because I unfortunately did socialize too much to the detriment of my education, but that's okay. I met a lot of people, and almost every single person was from a super zip. Almost every single person was from a super zip and
Really?
were from a wealthy background. Yes.
Oh, dude, I knew many people that were not that way. We must have had very different sampling bias.
Yes. Probably.
But it could also be what you studied. You studied something different than I did. I was also very involved in like some different like religious communities at the time. And also I was involved in some like physical social clubs. So like, for example, I was really big into rock climbing, and I knew a lot of people that were very low income in that community specifically.
Well, that's good. That makes me happy that is a thing, because I became convinced that the university was its sole job was to kind of be a resort for the children of Wall Street.
Dude, I just remembered I actually met a guy. Not met a guy. Like I knew him quite well. I wouldn't call him a friend. He actually made me a little uncomfortable due to some reasons I'm not going to get in on the podcast.
Right.
But he was a full-blooded Navajo from New Mexico. And he was on a full ride at Michigan. That guy was probably the poorest guy I may have ever met. It was like incredible. He had no resources at all.
I would love to see the university system do more of that, right? Because that's
That
kind of the
makes
image.
sense.
That's the image that they project, right? It's this this image of like the epitome of American competency and social mobility, right? And I think we saw opposite ends of that, but the end of it that I saw honestly made me very disturbed and nihilistic. I think that I came to wonder if like the people like you just described were just for lack of a better word, tokenized, so that the university couldn't be credibly accused of just admitting rich kids to subsidize their operations.
Well, let me be clear. I don't think that guy did well. I kind of lost track of him after my freshman year because he was actually friends with some guys that I was loosely friends with, and then I kind of got into a totally different social circle my freshman year or my sophomore year. But no, I think there is a lot of that going on. Like honestly, he probably would have done a lot better at like a University of New Mexico where they actually set him up with maybe it's a less expensive school, but they put him in a place to be more successful. Like pay for his apartment and give him a food stipend instead of like having him figure out whatever he had to figure out.
Here's a great example of how some of this works. And I know we're getting away from the like no grades freshman year thing, but this is important. We have to talk about this. Sure. I had to work during college because I had no money. So I had to work, and it just eats. It's such a competitive school. It eats into your time, and the people who didn't work just had an advantage. And I don't know. I saw a lot of that. So like, if you don't come from a wealthy background, like Ann Arbor is not a cheap place, and it's all inflated by this money coming in from these people from super zips. And so if you need to work through college, I mean, you are at a huge disadvantage to people who are like Kumon wonder athletes who just spend all their time, I don't know, trying to outperform you in these examinations. I don't know. I don't even know where I'm going with this. You know what?
Well, I will say, no.
Oh yeah. So let me just say.
Oh, I was just gonna make a comment on that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Brederick, no. You go ahead. You just go. We're kind of talking over each other.
You're right. Okay. I'll say what I'm going to say. I think that
I'm worried we're having technical difficulties.
Can you hear me? Am I audible to you, Brederick? Maybe not. Well, I'm just going to say what I'm going to say. I am now. Okay. We apologize, audience, for the technical difficulties. I don't know. Maybe there was like a AWS snafu or something. Regardless, I think that the freshmen not having to, whatever, have grades their freshman year is probably just to make the parents. I mean, it's probably partially to make the parents happy because the parents are paying a lot of money, right? And they want to see their investment not, I don't know, go to waste. The kids, there's probably a lot of pressure on them, but I think it's also just because grades are ultimately not that important. It's not the ultimate. There are competing priorities of the university that makes getting rid of grades freshman year an acceptable proposition. That is what I have to say.
Yeah. I will acknowledge that, and grades are just a very low digit measurement of someone's competence. And I think that there are definitely many examples of people who don't have the highest grades who are actually extremely competent. But at the same time, it is, albeit a flawed system, but it is an attempt at something. And I think that removing the grades removes all incentive for people to do their best. And I think that this idea of mental health as an excuse for that is not going to hold water with me. Life is stressful, and all you're doing is just like pushing out people figuring that out. It was very stressful for me in my freshman year in college. And a big part of me motivating was I need to get good grades because that's going to allow me to do things later on in my life. And by just removing these all, and yeah, I guess they made it so it's like you can't even opt out of it. You have to not have your grades shown because they're like, oh, because otherwise that would imply that like if you don't have your grades shown, you didn't do well. And that's always the truth. And so I am completely against this on every level of analysis. I think grades should actually become much harder. I think it should become harder to get an A, not easier to get an A, because of a bunch of statistical reasons, which I will not bore you with. But if grades are going to actually have meaning, they need to have meaning. And they do serve purpose still, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brederick. When I said that I understand this because the university has competing priorities, it wasn't in a positive light. Their priorities are things that, yeah. So I agree with you.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's very obvious. I mean, I'll just share, I guess, one very quick thing where it's like, that's why, like, the Ivy League grades, like, everybody just gets A's. And I know everybody doesn't just get A's. But, like, if you can, I remember looking at a study one time where they looked at, like, the grade point averages as time went on, like, decade level data. And it's like everything just moves to the right. And it's because it's advantageous for a university to have kids with higher grades because then they get preferential admission to universities. And then those for graduate schools, or they get better job placement opportunities or whatever. And so it's in everyone's incentive to give better grades. Like in the state of Michigan right now, the public schools, it's a different level, but the public schools are completely failing. The governor, it's a complete travesty, and it's literally her fault due to the way that she ran COVID. No one seems to remember 4 and 5 years ago, but it's literally 100% her fault. Maybe not 100%, 85. And so how do they respond? Well, they just change what's passing. Half of the kids in 4th grade in Michigan cannot read.
We'll have to get into this
read
at another time on the pod, because I worked in a school during COVID specifically as a literacy tutor. And it was bleak. It was going to be bleak. Bleak is the right word.
It's terrible, man. And that's part of it. This is okay. You have a conspiracy hat. I'm going to put on my conspiracy hat for a second here.
Put it on, Brederick. Put it on.
Thank you. My conspiracy hat is this. That is by design, having kids not being able to read, because then they can't be able to effectively articulate positions and they can't learn. And then it doesn't even matter what they vote. So that everyone's like, yeah, everyone should have the right to vote. Oh, and by the way, we just indoctrinated everyone with this insane propaganda stuff, and no one can read. So it doesn't even matter. They just believe everything we say. Oh, rip the lever for idiot number 1 or idiot number 2, whoever has the more stupid arguments that get you going on TikTok or on Instagram, and then doesn't even matter because you can't read. So you don't even have to prove anything out. Oh, and by the way, there's a bunch of brain dead audiences of our members of our audience and also of society that are like, it doesn't matter. Everyone should be able to vote. It doesn't matter if you can't read. It doesn't matter if you don't have any understanding of anything in reality. They should be able to vote because then they can be indoctrinated with insane propaganda.
Yeah, there's that. And then I think there's also just the actual competition with short form video. Like, it's really hard to convince kids to read when they have an iPad or an iPhone.
That's called being an adult, Don.
But they're kids. We're talking about kids, not adults.
No. I'm sorry. You're right.
Why can't the kids be adults? Why can't the kids be adults?
What I meant was an adult in the room is, okay, guys, we're going to put down the iPads now. I know it's challenging and I know it's annoying, but you know what? We're going to do it. And in 10 years, in 20 years, when you can actually read good literature and you can actually digest information that is critically important to things that you value, you will look back and you will say, yes, I remember, Mr. DeGear and his help when I was a wee little lad, develop self-control because I needed to do the basic skills. So now I'm able to provide for my family and actually digest information that's meaningful to me. This is called paying it forward. It's coming back to the NIMBYism, and no one even cares because it's like, I'd rather just let them do the iPad. Why have my kid pay attention? Why discipline my kid? I can just put this screen in front of them, let them zone out, and then mom and I can get drunk on a bottle of wine and go have sex, and they don't even know that we're missing because they're on the iPad. It's insanity.
Frederick, I think it's a little. Let me interject here. A lot of the kids that I worked with, one, the school had iPads. And
that's even worse.
The schools are making a lot of money. And I also used to work for an ed tech company. There are a lot of people making money off of kids being on electronics in school. The second thing I'll say is most kids live in a dual income household. And the less money you have, the more the parents work like dogs. And because of the liability of having your kid unsupervised, it is best to, what's the right word? Keep them pacified with moving images on an electronic device.
You know what else happens to a pacified society?
What, Brederick? What happens?
They go extinct. Next topic, Don. I'm so fired up all of a sudden out of nowhere on this one. I could just lose my mind.
Well, yeah. Next topic. Well, first, I just want to say, I know we're supposed to move on here, but I forgot to say this earlier.
Send it.
非常好 to the Chinese honeypot command, and shame on the University of Michigan, and also shame on East Grand Rapids. All right, the final topic, and this is a big one. Or is it a little one? Are atoms real?
Teeny tiny.
Teeny tiny. Are atoms real? I remember, and I'm going to preface this by saying, when I was growing up, everyone told me Pluto was a planet. Then all of a sudden, it wasn't a planet anymore. The Magic School Bus was like, we're going to the planet Pluto. And now everyone's like, oh, Pluto's not a planet. Okay, sounds good. I can maybe see Pluto if I have a telescope. I can't see atoms. How do I know that atoms are real? Everyone tells me atoms are real. Nucleus of the atom, electron, proton. Like, your body is mostly empty space. Has anyone even actually seen these things?
You know, as you know, I always love to go back to first principles. And this is kind of one of those kind of things, right? Because if you start to get down to it, right, it's like when people say first principles, quote unquote, one of them is like physical chemistry laws, right? Like, you've got your periodic table, which is this collection of all of the atoms that we know about, which are these elemental things, right? And they have these structures with a certain neutrons and protons, and then these electrons kind of flying around them in this, like, you know, little mini solar system type thing. And I must admit, as a young man, I was also extremely dubious and extremely suspicious of this this presentation of everything is made up of these little things. And I often ask that question, how do we know? I have some answers, actually, because I do remember some of the chemistry that I took my freshman year, because grades were important to me and I wanted to do well. So I actually tell you, because
before you throw out these answers, let me just say, like, biology makes similar claims about tiny things. They're like, oh, your body's made out of cells.
Sure.
There's paramecium in the water, but you know what? You can take a microscope and you can look at it. I have vivid memories as a child of using a microscope to look at these things and saying, oh shit, that's real. Permanent change in my mental model. I've never seen an atom. Never seen one.
No.
So I'm skeptical.
You know, I think you might be right. I think you're onto something there, actually. And I remember there was this one experiment that they claimed was kind of this idea of, like, how do we know atoms are real? And I know, dude, we're probably, like, digging deep and somebody's proved something completely beyond this. If somebody knows better evidence of why atoms are real or not real, and it's actually a grand conspiracy, drop them in the comments, obviously. Reach out. We'd love to have you on. But there was this thing that they called the gold foil experiment. Do you remember this from chemistry? And it was basically, do you remember this one?
No, so actually I never took chemistry. I took it sophomore year, but I had a very distracted teacher. He said that the first day of class, he was very depressed. He was like, they're turning on CERN today, the particle collider, and we're all going to die. And then
he was one of these guys.
Yeah. And then I didn't learn a single thing in chemistry. And actually, when I went to college, I took the chemistry placement test. And they're like, my counselor was like, Don, you got 5th percentile on the chemistry placement test. I'm like, oh, top 5%. All right. And she's like, oh, no.
No.
She was like, you
Other
should never
5.
take chemistry at this university ever. No matter what someone tells you. And I was like, okay. I'm still thinking about, how do percentiles work again? Yeah. So I know nothing about chemistry.
Okay, fair
at
enough.
All. Yeah.
Well,
there you go.
I
Now
will
you
give
know.
you I will give you the high level thing, and due to the fact that the way that my brain works, actually the name of the guy that did this just popped in my head because I believe his name was Rutherford, and I remember I used to do all these like little memory tricks, and I remember Rutherford was ruthless, okay, and that's important to remember because of what I'm about to explain. So he had this like gold plate film, like a foil of gold. And then because he was ruthless, he shot these like neutrons or some kind of particle at this gold foil. And he noticed that most of these particles passed right through the foil, like just went right through. Some of them were like reflected in like very odd orientations, like they had partially hit something, and very few of them were reflected directly back. And that was this idea that if they were deflected or reflected back, they were hitting the nucleus of these gold atoms. And if they passed right through, then they were just going right through. And because most of them passed right through, that implied that most of physical matter was actually open space. So I think that there's a lot of this like inference type evidence where it's like we're inferring that most of these things are empty space because we shot this particle and it just went right through the gold foil. It didn't hit anything. So it must be empty space.
Okay. Oh, hold up. Remember, I know nothing about chemistry. How did they know that these particles were doing anything? If the particles are as tiny as the atom, you can't see the particles. I don't know. This all.
I think they got scanners or something, dude. Like, I don't know. Maybe they have a scanner somewhere. I don't know.
When did this happen? When did they do this test?
Oh, this was a long time ago. You can look it up, but like probably the late 1800s, early 1900s. I don't know. But I'm just saying that this is the way a lot of this science is done. And a lot of it is like, okay, but they didn't just take that piece of evidence in isolation, right? They used that in a whole spider web of other evidence to say like the best way that we know how to explain all of this evidence is this type of structure called an atom that has this nucleus and has these electrons around it. I think that's how a lot of this stuff happens.
Well, I think some evidence for atoms is that they figured out how to build an atomic bomb, right? I guess for me, the person who knows nothing about chemistry, I'm like, okay, well, at least they knew enough about this thing to figure out that if you could break this thing apart, you can make a huge explosion. So, well, that's impressive.
Well, that's where like these so-called like that's like one of the big things in science, right? Is can you explain the observations that you're seeing with some kind of model? It tends to be like a mathematical model of some type, right? Like, can you explain the predictions you're seeing with your model? And then can you actually make predictions about things that you have not seen yet and then verify those? And that's actually one of the famous stories around the development of atomic weaponry was there were a bunch of physicists who were like, these runaway chain reactions with things like uranium are possible. You just have to like kick them off, and then that runaway chain reaction is what we know as like a nuclear bomb, a nuclear explosion, right? And then now we have fission bombs, or these so what they call them, the hydrogen bombs, right? Which are a whole nother like thing. But it was like literally there was this huge debate, I believe, in like the 20s and the 30s amongst physicists of like, was that possible or not? And then this one guy, and I can't remember who it was, published a paper. And then finally Einstein was like, oh, like I do believe that this is physically possible. But it was all math. It wasn't like they had done anything. I mean, there had been like experiments and stuff to verify a lot of this, but like The first time they did it was the Trinity test, where they actually were like, okay, is this going to work? And the famous story is Einstein literally wrote a letter to FDR and was like, hey, just so you know, my professional opinion is now actually an atomic bomb is a real thing. It is possible. So you might want to look into this, because if the Germans develop one, it is game over for you.
So I have a better question. I have a better question
Okay.
than are atoms real? Where is the boundary between observable and inferred physical reality, right? I can see a paramecium. I can see a cell with a microscope, right? When does that break down, and when do they just start guessing about stuff? So you can see a lump of gold, but how do you know that a gold atom, how do you know it's not a gold molecule? How do you know... How do they know any of this stuff? I know nothing about this. I have no idea how they make that distinction in where observable reality breaks down and it's just inferred from math, like you said.
Well, I think that it is exactly what you just said. Observable reality is something that you actually can observe. Now, for you, the thing that you just talked about was visual observation with your own eye, right? But I'll give you an example of something that is not visibly observable, but is observable nonetheless, and you will guarantee it's true. If you take a big cast iron pot and you put it in the oven and you heat it to 500 degrees, and someone pulls that out of the oven and holds it in front of your face, you will feel the heat coming off of that thing hitting your face. That is an observation. But if you were to look at it visibly, it would look the same as a non-hot cast iron pan. So I think it's, if you step back abstractly a little bit, these are all just observations. Everything is observation. How do you know anything? Everything is being mediated through this observation lens, and then we build a state space model in our mind of what the reality actually is. But everything is perceived through our senses.
So I actually did some Wikipedia research. I read a Wikipedia article or two, and it has come to my attention that there are some holes in our understanding of physics. Right, so they were able to make these. So there was this guess, right? Like, can we create a runaway nuclear reaction that results in a detonation? The Trinity test proved it correct. They're like, okay, we were right about XYZ things that we were only guessing about beforehand.
Sure.
Right now, I don't know a lot about quantum physics, but I understand that quantum theory, I understand this because I listened to like a 20-minute podcast and read a Wikipedia article, that the quantum theory explains electromagnetism, whatever, like the force between that holds an atom together. But gravitation is not explained by it. And gravitation is interesting. So more context. I have been attempting to give myself a scientific education that I never received. One of the ways that I've been doing that has been listening to the Feynman lectures on physics, some of which are on Spotify. They're really good. He sounds like Bernie Sanders because he's a Jewish dude from New York. But instead of being like the billionaires, he's like the strong and weak nuclear forces and the force of gravitation cannot be reconciled by current scientific understanding. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
It's fun to listen to him. But the first lecture I listened to was on the theory of gravitation, and he says it's a theory because they had all these different ideas. He talks about the history of it, right? From like the invention of human, what's it called? Where you look at the stars and astronomy. And he's like, they started measuring the planets, and they're like, okay, the planets move in these periods and in these spaces in the sky. And then no one put together people also knew that things would fall towards Earth, but no one put together that the speed of movement through the sky was the same as the speed of movement of stuff falling until Newton, I think. And that they needed to continually verify because they kept finding things in space that slightly violated their calculations, but that
Right.
actually made them start to understand the gravitational forces between objects, right? How like, it's not just the sun, like they all exert forces on each other. I don't know. It was just like this process of continuous refinement. Anyways,
Yeah.
that process is clearly not done because they have all these ideas of quantum physics that is largely downstream from math calculations they've made that just doesn't integrate with gravity at all. And so I'm not saying it's all fake, but where do we go from here? And what are normal people supposed to do about it?
I'll tell you what normal people are supposed to do about it, because actually I think you're 100% right. Whenever someone says something as stupid as the science is settled, immediately disregard everything else that they say. That's actually what you're supposed to do. So when someone gets up and goes, the science is settled on climate change, the science is settled on COVID, the science is settled on ... immediately disregard everything else they're saying, because they're a political operative. A scientist would never say that. Ergo, exactly what you're talking about with these physics theories. Science is a methodology to learn more and disregard things that you've learned to no longer represent what you're actually doing. It's insane to me that they don't even teach this in schools anymore. They don't do that. They don't teach you how to think. They just tell you what to think now. It's a bunch of idiots
Pluto's a
teaching
planet,
idiots.
and then they delete Pluto, like that guy in that photograph with Stalin that just got erased. That's like what happened to Pluto. They're just like, oh, Pluto's not a planet. They don't even say anymore. They're just like, it's not.
Yeah.
But 5 years ago, what are you talking about?
Yeah, they just remove it. Well, and that's the whole idea, is that's actually a sign of progress. And what it's supposed to say is like, okay, we had this certain notion. We had reasons to call things. A little bit of that is just naming conventions. That's a little bit made up of what is a planet, what is not a planet. A lot of that stuff is just made up for convention's sake. And
are you saying Earth is a planetoid? Is that what you're trying to say?
I don't know. I mean, that's kind of what I mean. But when you kind of get beyond that, it's kind of like, well, what are we trying to do? We're trying to understand the worlds we live in, such that we can use that information to our advantage. So traditionally, a scientist was supposed to go out and learn information for information's sake. Why do things work the way they are? How do things work? What is actually out there? Are atoms real or are they not? And then they took that information and they typically handed it off to engineers, and engineers actually built things with that. Okay? The scientists build nothing. They don't build anything. If you're building something, that's an engineer. That's just semantically what an engineer is. I always got offended by that as an engineer. Scientists don't build anything. They just discover stuff and do cool things, discovering things, but they don't actually do anything with that knowledge. As soon as you start to do stuff with that, like take the Maxwell equations and build a radio tower, now you're an engineer. I just want to be very clear about that. Rant over. So to answer your question, Don, what do you do with it? You constantly are trying to expand your understanding and expand the predictive model's capabilities. You're trying to seek new knowledge. Now, you have to always be fighting against these institutions and people who have a vested interest in the current paradigm being continued, because they have no interest in completely undermining their careers.
I feel like hasn't it been like that for a long time? I mean,
it's been like that
part
as far
of my
as
scientific education is involved reading about Copernicus and Galileo, and they were very what's the right word? Looked down on for their views. I mean, basically these pronunciations about reality at that point in time by the Catholic Church, who was kind of like the epistemic regime of Europe and kind of the authority on what was or was not real. Even something as simple as like the Earth revolves around the sun and not vice versa was damaging to their authority. And, I wonder if science is science. I guess by science, I mean like our model of extant knowledge of reality. It has always been a political tool, right? So like the times where you could actively question that and interrogate that are actually more of an exception than a rule. You know, like, why would you not want to control everyone's model of reality, right?
Well, I can give you a very good reason of why you wouldn't want to do that. Because I give you two ones. One is actually kind of more of just a purist reason of you actually want to know the truth yourself. And if you're only have yourself, you know, we talk a lot about conspiracies on the program. We can't investigate every conspiracy. So the reason you wouldn't want to control someone else's perhaps worldview is because you actually want to know the truth. And why would you want to know the truth? Because it's in your own best interest to actually have people who are making decisions actually know the truth. So take, for example, COVID. I want to empower anyone who has a legitimate investigatory capability and prosecutorial capability to find out what actually happened with a lot of these decisions and prosecute people for very bad decisions that were made in nefarious reasons. Why? Because I don't want that to happen again. I don't even care about justice anymore in the past. I just don't want it to happen again. And we're not even close to that right now. That would be one example why, I think.
Yeah. I I wonder if, you know, the scientific, I guess this is just looping back to the universities as an idea, or just the universities period. Like, the modern university system is a direct descendant of the medieval university system,
Yes.
run by the Catholic Church, the same one that told Galileo to shut up.
Right.
To me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the history of science from my smooth-brained Wikipedia education is something like you have these institutions that curate a body of knowledge and try to keep like a hegemonic control over what is considered reality. And then you have difficult people that make it impossible to deny their claims. You incorporate their claims, and then you try to reassert hegemonic control of reality. As far as I know, has there ever been a free-for-all where people were truly all proactively engaged in seeking the truth? It seems like the people that really wanted to know what was actually true seem like outliers in every society, in every epistemic regime.
So I think that there's a couple different ways to take that. And I think that there is certainly some kind of a feedback mechanism on that. But I just want to take the side of the institution for a second and say, you know, there actually is a responsibility of that. I can't remember the word that you used, but this idea of this chunk of knowledge that they're kind of guarding. What was the word you used? Because I liked it.
What, I think it was hegemonic reality.
Yes, exactly. Right. Like that idea, because if you actually are, let's take, for example, the National Institutes of Health, or, any of these kind of the CDC, any of these kind of groups, right? Like, you actually do need to maintain an order, because for every Galileo that we remember in history, there were 100 people who were actually just crazy, saying all sorts of things. And so there needs to be coming to the defense of some of these institutions, because you can't just completely throw everything out every 6 months. If those of us working in AI know this now. We've basically been throwing out everything every 3 to 6 months over the last 3 years, and everyone's losing their minds. Because it's so easy to show, actually, this is just a better way of doing it. Actually, this is just a better way of doing this. Actually, this is just a better way of doing this. And you're like, yeah, and that's true. Oh, and that's true again. Oh, and that's true again. And it's just overwhelming. So it's like I'm not saying suppress the truth. That's not what these institutions were saying. But what they're saying is like, hang on. I'm not just going to believe you. You got to come up with a little more evidence, man. You got to come up with a little more evidence. And then at some point, there is this gradual turning where people say, actually, like, I think that guy might be right, man. Like, it looks a little more probable that that guy is right. That's when a paradigm shift happens.
I'm going to pivot the conversation because I have another question, and I'm learning a lot right now. Are they going to add more elements to the periodic table, or have they found all the elements?
Dude, no, there's definitely like undiscovered ones, but the whole idea of the periodic table, and again, I'm no chemistry expert, but like the whole idea is that gives you the framework of how the system works. So there are elements that have only existed for nanoseconds at a time on that table because they're like unstable. You know, like my favorite thing being a Berkeley man is they used to have this shirt. Berkeley is an absolute powerhouse in chemistry, absolute powerhouse. And so is Berkeley Lab up the hill and a bunch of like the people out there in California, absolute powerhouse. And so there is actually a T-shirt that many people in Berkeley have that is Berkeley, the element berkelium, because it was invented, you know, they kind of discovered it in Berkeley, and Californium, which is another element that they also discovered at Berkeley.
Nice.
So I just thought, I didn't have one, but I thought that was just the slickest T-shirt ever. Berkelium, Californium T-shirt.
It's a flex for sure.
It's very cool. There are many elements that have been discovered there. And it's that idea of like people kind of predict, they're like, this is a missing spot. And so my understanding of chemistry basically in like the 18 and 1900s was just like filling in those things by doing these insane experiments with things like hadron colliders, you know, this CERN and pressure cookers and all sorts of crazy stuff to try to get the reaction, the conditions such that that element could exist, but because they're so unstable, they fall apart.
I'm learning so much right now. I've already learned more than my entire high school chemistry class. So you just cut me off when I've asked too many questions. Because
Dude,
I don't even. I
hope I'm correct on this stuff. I hope the audience fills it in. That stuff, I'm like pretty sure on all that stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Next question. Do you think that some of the implications of quantum theory could create a materialist explanation for things that have been considered parapsychology? I know that you've read a lot of Carl Jung. I've read some of it as well. You know, there's a lot of stuff tangential to that. Carl Jung is a medical professional ultimately, and medical professionals need to be very in touch with ground truth reality because of the survivability of their patients, right? And just the nature of medical education. So I took his claims of parapsychological phenomena kind of seriously. And you know, this is maybe an example of you know, you talk to enough people who say that they've had a dream of someone dying and then they find out they died and they weren't in the same place. It's almost the same as like these people in the 1920s and 30s being like, so we looked at all these equations and we feel like an atomic bomb could maybe work. You know, it's like, oh, I've talked to all these people and I think maybe remote viewing and astral projection could work, right? And then do you think some of these quantum theories and elements of what they've come to understand there could create materialist explanations for some of these phenomena?
Yeah, so to answer your question, I'll just give you the answer. I think, of course, it's possible. I do not believe that to be the case. As a theist, I don't believe that to be the case, but possibly. And I want to step back and answer your question by this, right? Is there's all these different like frameworks and models to try to explain these things. So for example, a very common one is like stochastics and probability versus like a like deterministic physics-based model. So for example, Newtonian physics there's no probability in that. It's just deterministic equations. And they give you remarkably good predictions of what actually happens in like kind of mechanics, let's say, bouncing a basketball, shooting a rifle, that kind of stuff. Really, really good. There's no statistics needed. Then there's other types of phenomena that like we're just not that we don't have as good a models, I guess you would say. And so they'll enter in these like statistical models where they're like, well, I take a bunch of averages and then I model this whole population, for example, everybody's height, as this like random variable. I'm not actually building a computer model of every single person on earth and then trying to do like they have kids and they have kids and building this thing. It's like I don't have a model to predict that, but I can measure everybody's behavior and then put it on like a bell curve and start to talk about like distributions and probability. These are like fundamentally different approaches to investigate a lot of these things. Now, you've got these crazy guys like Terence Tao, brilliant mathematician guy who's like, I see the connection between algebra and probability. And he's got this very soft-spoken voice, and like only he and like 3 or 4 other guys. It's like Goodwill Hunting level math where like no one sees it but him. And then, they spend the next, 6 months writing papers and explaining it. And then it takes the rest of us 10 years to understand it. Most of us never get there. But like, you see what I'm saying? So there's like all of these different, those like unifying theories of math and everything. So the reason I bring those up is because that's the way I think about a lot of these like quantum things where you're like, hey, like it's pretty clear the models that we have right now don't explain everything. They do some stuff really, really well, but they don't explain everything. So obviously we're missing something. Now, if you were to ask me and many of the theists out there, they'd say like, well, it's actually more probable that like God created the world and these things, and it's like more reasonable and fits the data better and is less of a stretch to say that there is a God and that explains a lot of these things. Now they'll say that that's, a cop out, this, that, and the other, maybe, but at the same time you'd say, okay, well, hey, maybe, I don't know, you're putting just as much faith that there is a alternative theory that you just haven't discovered yet, and you're kind of relying on actually a very similar logical path. You just don't think that way because you don't have a God with a capital G in it, but you've got some other model in there. You see what I'm saying? So there's a lot of different approaches to these things that people would say, but I think it's totally possible. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want the audience to, I could keep asking questions, but I know for the audience sake, we have to wind it down at some point, but just circling back to the are atoms real? You can't see them, and you have to infer their presence. Like, how much of reality is just stuff that you have to infer? Like, for me, at least, and I know this is funny because a viewer who gave me a little feedback said that our segments always collapse into epistemics. No matter what the topic is. How do we know she's a spy?
Exactly. That's all that matters, though.
It's how much of the world, because you can only ever personally experience such a narrow slice of reality, how much of this stuff do you actually have to just infer, right? Like, we live in these huge complex systems. I just infer that the economy is the way that it is based off things I like watch on CNBC Squawk Box and read on FinTwit. And that could be accurate or inaccurate. I have no idea, right? Like, how much of reality? I feel like we just have to infer most of reality, and that's the state of the human condition in the 21st century, which is not an easy spot to be in. It would have been a lot easier to live, as we said last episode, in a hunter-gatherer community where, oh my God, this is a whole, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole. I started reading on Wikipedia about haplogroups and how the San Bushmen are actually like, they proved recently via DNA that like they are the original humans. And then like there was a divergence. All other humans have DNA from like this other haplogroup, and the divergence, it's like the San Bushmen and everyone else, which is kind of crazy. But that's a total. Yeah. I don't know. Some things you can figure out. Some things you just have to infer. I don't know.
I think
it can be exhausting for people that want to know the truth.
Well, that was supposed to be the job of your family and of your culture and your society, was supposed to be part of that. And part of that was supposed to be like, if I'm raised right in my family, I just get a lot of this by osmosis. Why don't I do X? Well, because my family told me to, and this, that, and the other, and I'm just inferring this. I don't have to go like reinvestigate, name something, gambling addiction. Like, that's just part of my society's rules and baked in. So I don't even have to like go explore that. I can just take that for granted. Why is getting married helpful? I don't have to go back and do this whole first principles things. It's just like I'm living through culture and society, and I'm kind of just inferring a lot of these things. And a lot of these things are actually like the wisdom of generations passed down. Like there's many people who are, I think, idiots and very foolish when they say like, what do I have to learn from some religious text, say it's the Bible, the Quran, whatever, like from these people 10,000 years ago? Like, what does it even matter? And it's like, well, if these texts lasted that long, there's something in them that's worth learning about because people preserved them. Why would they preserve them if they weren't worthy of something? Even if it's the negative, right? Like, don't do that, you know?
Well, and if a lot of reality is inferential instead of explicitly provable,
Exactly.
you have people who've been doing that since the beginning of history and probably even longer. And their inferences, especially the ones that have lasted and propagated, may be kind of accurate.
Yeah. Well, I got to say, Don, we were all over the place on this one. I think this might be a good place to wrap, if that's okay with you.
I endorse that. Yep.
All right.
Atoms are not real, and I'm just kidding.
They might
and
not
that's
be.
it.
But dude, jokes aside, my final comment: maybe there actually is a better explanatory model than that fits the data even better, but we just don't see it yet. And I pray that kid that comes and finds that model, whether it's a guy, a gal, American, Chinese, I just hope that they have the courage to stand up and make their voice heard and present that. And then eventually people will have enough humility to accept that model if it works better.
Right on, Brederick. I think that's a wrap.
All right. Send the love mail to Don. Send the hate mail to me, Brederick. And until next week, see you next time.